Good evening and welcome. My name is Joan Woolery. I'm the staff liaison to the IEEE Design Automation Standards Committee and will be your host for today's webinar. The agenda for today is a quick overview of the IEEE and the IEEE Standards Association, and that will be about 5 minutes. A description of the IEEE Design Automation Standards Committee and IEEE Design Automation Standards Project, which should last for about 30 minutes. That will be followed by a 10-minute Q&A session, and then we'll introduce you to the new IEEE office in Bangalore and how it can serve you. That will be about 5 minutes. We'll then talk about the IEEE Standards Interest Group and the Electronic Design Automation Subgroup, which are based in India. Then we'll give you information on how to get involved in IEEE standards projects, and then give you a final opportunity to ask questions or comment. Now let's get started. First up is Jenny Steinhagen, the Global Strategy Manager for the IEEE-SA International Programs, and she will present an overview of the IEEE and the IEEE Standards Association. Jenny?
Thank you, Joan, and thank you everyone for joining today's webinar. My name is Jenny Steinhagen. I am a Global Strategy Manager with the IEEE Standards Association. In this position, I regularly interact with individuals, entities, and organizations around the world. IEEE is a global member organization known throughout the world. In fact, there are over 400,000 IEEE members located in over 160 countries, who represent hundreds of IEEE sections in 10 IEEE geographic regions. In India, for example, there are over 37,000 IEEE members in 11 different geographic sections. And these numbers are expected to grow. Just earlier this year, in 2011, IEEE made it easier than ever for individuals in India to join IEEE by offering electronic membership at a reduced rate. We'll hear more about these details related to electronic membership as today's call progresses. The majority of IEEE members are working professionals and academics. A large number of IEEE members are students. Perhaps some of you on the call today first heard about IEEE during your university years. Or perhaps you were exposed to one or more of IEEE's 3 million technical documents found in the IEEE Digital Library, or it's likely that you've attended or heard about IEEE's 1,000-plus conferences held annually. Today, though, our focus is on the standards that are developed within IEEE. The IEEE Standards Association, known also as IEEE-SA, is the organization within IEEE that oversees the development of IEEE standards, including the design automation standards we'll be talking about today. Some other well-known IEEE standards include those about wireless technology, 802, or smart grid, just to name a few of the over 1,300 standards in the IEEE standards portfolio. Over 20,000 technical experts around the world, such as those on the phone today, develop these standards. Many, but not all of IEEE standards developers are IEEE Standards Association members, since participation is open and free. IEEE-SA membership is only required for working group chairs and during the IEEE balloting stage. To date, there are approximately 7,000 individual members and over 200 corporate IEEE Standards Association members. The open development process of the IEEE Standards Association is focused on collaboration, consensus, and solutions. And IEEE-SA follows very important policies and procedures to ensure that the essential components of collaboration, consensus, and solution finding are followed every step of the way. The IEEE global offices and their knowledgeable staff play a part in education about the IEEE Standards Association policies and procedures, and focused on current and future standard developers Within IEEE, there are 45 different technical societies and councils that provide technical oversight for IEEE standards development. These societies and councils are made up of various technical communities that are populated by technical working groups. At the level of working group and study group is where the real work of standards development takes place, with the development and review of draft standards documents. This type of organization at work is seen in the design automation structure within IEEE. Working groups draft the projects that fall under the IEEE Design Automation Standards Committee. The IEEE Computer Society provides the overall technical umbrella for this electronic design automation technology. We are very lucky today to have Stan Krolikowski, the chair of the IEEE Design Automation Standards Committee, to tell us more about DASC, the standards it develops, and the global impact of these standards.
Thank you, Jenny. And now, Mr. Stan Krolikowski, chair of the IEEE Design Automation Standards Committee, will give us an overview of DASC.
Hi, everyone. Good evening to everyone in India. My name is Stan Krolikowski. As Joan says, I am chair of the IEEE Design Automation Standards Committee. I also work in Cadence Design Systems. I am group director of standards and alliances there. I've been an IEEE member for, well over 30 years. Don't want to date myself. I've been in standards for the last 26 years. So I started in the EDA standards world and actually was involved in some of the first standards. And from that perspective, I'd like to give you an overview of what the DASC, or the Design Automation Standards Committee, generally called the DASC, does, and some of its overview and some of its specific projects. So my agenda here for the next 30 minutes will be an introduction, very brief, to the DASC, an overview of the DASC working groups, and then I think what is a very important point is what can be the relationships between the DASC and the Indian EDA community. When I first heard about this particular webinar in the Standards Interest Group from Joan and Jenny, I was very, very excited. It's been one of my intentions as the DASC chair to make sure that we go international. We already have many members in North America, Canada, and Western Europe. We have good relationships with Japan. I am very, very happy that we could potentially have now a good good relationships with the Standards Interest Group and engineers in general in India. Also, I'll be looking at other countries along the way. I think that the EDA standards permeate every region of the world in products, and I think it's important that the standards also have similar coverage. So a very short introduction to the DASC. The DASC is a sponsor for EDA standards, most EDA standards in the IEEE. There are a few EDA standards, and things that we call EDA standards, for example, test, that fall outside of the DASC for historical purposes, just that they were started before the DASC started or something of the sort. But in general, most of the EDA standards in the IEEE, the standards that the IEEE works on, fall under the DASC. We are the sponsor. What that means is that all the groups we have oversight as the DASC over these groups. We will help them form, we'll help them decide their purpose, we'll vote on their purpose, we'll make sure that they have proper policies and procedures, we'll help them form the balloting groups, help them interface with the other groups in the IEEE, for example, groups that actually go off and approve the standards down the road and give final approval to it. So the sponsor is in some sense the Global Oversight Committee to the standards, and we are the Global Oversight Committee in the DASC to EDA standards. One thing I should mention is that the DASC, the IEEE DASC, has international consequences. On the American level, we are ANSI standards. Anything that comes out of the DASC becomes an ANSI standard. Very much, for example, like ANSI C, I think most people have heard that. Well, certainly System C is also an ANSI standard. We also work with the IEC on dual logo standards. The IEC is an organization in Switzerland, aligned and with other groups like ISO that you may have heard about, that works on a global level, and IEEE and IEC have agreements that when the IEEE, certainly the DASC, produces standards, they will also get a logo from the IEC. This, for certain national standards groups, is extremely important. So we're very happy about that. We are a very, very active group. We have 30 members. We meet 10 times a year. We have 2 months a year we don't meet, typically because of holidays and things like that. We usually have 1 hour. They're now turning into 1.5-hour meetings around 8 a.m. in the morning Pacific time. We do have meetings at alternate times, certainly when we're going to have attendees from Asia, for example. We have been known to have meetings around midnight Pacific time in order to accommodate other members. A very nominal fee to join, and we do have the website. I would direct you to DASC.org. Okay, the purpose, very quickly, right? It's very simple. We're to promote the development of standards in the electronic design automation industry. As I'll mention, we work with other groups like Accelera and OSCE and take standards that they develop at a first level, and then we'll refine them as part of the IEEE process. But in the general, we are there to promote the standards and to get the standards out to the world, in the EDA world. The responsibilities, I think, are very clear, right? We develop the standards, but on the second bullet is also perhaps not so obvious. Do we maintain the standards? Right? Standards are developed, but then there's things that need to be done with them. For example, the question is, do they need to be updated? Are there standards that have outlived their usefulness? Are there standards that do we need to somehow have interrelationships between standards? In fact, you'll see one on encryption later that actually talks about how do you do encryption mechanisms for other DASC standards. So there's standards that refer to other DASC standards. We, of course, cooperate with other appropriate standards development organizations. I mentioned OSCE, I mentioned Accelera. We also, for example, right at the moment, deal with the Japan National Standards Committee and other groups. But so wherever there's interest in EDA standards, we are happy to talk with people and cooperate as required. Okay, the DASC officers, real quickly. I am chair. Yatin Trivedi from Synopsys is vice chair. That is something new. Karen Bartleson from Synopsys had been vice chair, but we just recently had an election and Yatin was elected. Kathy Werner from Freescale is secretary. And Victor Berman, who had been at Cadence for a long time, is now retired, but he continues to be our treasurer. Okay, the process, the standards process. I'm going to spend a few minutes on this. I want to make sure we get a feel for the amount of oversight and the amount of effort that's required by a group like the DASC, by a sponsors group. This is pretty much uniform across the IEEE, but I'll talk about it, of course, in the EDA standards context. First thing that happens is a so-called PAR, a Project Authorization Request is developed. You notice that I have yellow and purple, or green and purple, sorry. The green is things that the sponsor organization does, and in this case the DASC, and there's other IEEE committees that will be in purple. The first thing that the sponsor like the DASC would do is for a working group is to make sure that the so-called PAR, or Project Authorization Request, is developed. This is a very, very important document because what it says is that for that particular working group, for a particular amount of time, and there's always a time limit can be extended, but there's a time limit, says, okay, here is the scope that's going to be worked on, the scope of the standard. This is the reason the standards are being done. These are the stakeholders in the standard. These are the other organizations you're working with. This is the intellectual property we may need to get licenses for. So it's very, very much a roadmap, as you would, setting the boundaries for what the standards that particular working group is going to be working on. So this is important. I think all of you on the line here are engineers, working engineers, engineering managers. You all have seen feature creep, right, where all of a sudden new features show up or they're attempted to be put in. One of the things that IEEE tries very hard to do is to make sure that the standards that come out, the whole process is done very precisely. And this PAR is very important in making sure that there is not feature creep, that what the PAR, says is the scope of the working group's activities will be the scope of the working group activity. If the PAR needs to be revised, it can be revised, but that is done as a conscious decision. This is something, I put it there in green because the DASC both helps, certainly the DASC chair helps the working group chairs develop the PAR, get it approved by the right committees upstairs in the IEEE, as we would say, but the DASC membership also vote on the PAR. And this is not a rubber stamp. There's often debate to say, wait a minute, why are we doing this kind of thing? So that's the first step. Once that happens, the PAR is approved by the new standards committee, often called NESCOM. And once that happens, once the IEEE NESCOM approves the PAR, working group develops the standard. This is where the effort happens. Depends on how, what the material being standardized, what form it's in, will determine the amount of time that's being used. So, for example, if something comes in from a group like Accelera that's already been very much polished, the actual standards development group of the particular working group may be shorter than no longer. If somebody just has some really good ideas, and maybe there's some different examples out in the industry already of some technology that needs to be standardized, the actual development process may be a little bit longer. But so the DASC is involved in this all the time. Every meeting, the working group chairs, we report progress. And again, there's no rubber stamping here. If members of the DASC feel that a working group is going off track, there will be discussion. Then there's a sponsor ballot. This is an important process, right? The working group has done its work and said, we're finished. Then there is a process where a different set of individuals, or at least nominally a different set of individuals. So, for example, if the working group had companies or entities that were made it up, companies like maybe Intel, IBM, Freescale, Cadence, Synopsys, and so forth, there can be a balloting group where similar entities, many of them may be the same, can actually vote on what came out of the working group. If the working group was comprised of individuals, and there are both these so-called entity and individual working groups, so if individual Joe and Mary and so forth join working groups as individuals, and that working group allows that, then the balloting later on will be by individual. So don't want to go into too much of the difference between the entity and the individual working groups, just to say that after the working group is done, there is a ballot. And it's very, very precise. We want to make sure that people, when they approve these standards or when entities approve these standards, that there's consensus. So the way the rules are is that of the people that sign up to vote, 75% of those who have signed up actually have to cast a vote. And of those that cast a vote, 75% have to be affirmative, the so-called 75-75 rule. This is a very high bar. Okay, this is, super majority, if you will, that you really need to have, what we would call consensus, almost unanimous approval, not quite, right? There is room for dissent. In any case, we go through the sponsor ballot, we pass the 75-75 rule, and what do? Are we done? No, as it turns out, we have a second ballot, because anyone who votes negatively in the first ballot has to be answered. So maybe the answer could be, we thought about what you object to, and we decided not to do it for this reason. It could be a change to say, oh, we hadn't thought about that, so here's a change. Then there's a second ballot, and people who have voted the first time, positively or negatively, get to change their vote. So again, it's 75% of the people who are on the balloting group join. 75% of those have to, have their vote positive. At the end, very high bar, answer all the questions, and we're done. Well, not quite, because then you go to the higher level committee called RevCom, or the review committee, and then the standards board, and the standard is approved. This is why when an IEEE standard comes out, it looks professional, it covers the technology. It may have issues, maybe it's something needs revising or something of the sort, but in general, the high quality of the EDA and all other IEEE standards, I think, is generally evident, and it's because of this rigorous process. In the case of the EDA world, it's a rigorous process that the DASC is leading the working group and then the balloting group through. So I just wanted to give you an overview. There's a lot more I could say on this, but just to give you a sense of the complexity. This typically, to get a standards through, is about 1.5 to 2 years. It can be longer. It could be shorter in some cases, and there's a certain amount of time that's just built into the system that can't be, gotten around. But it's, people may complain sometimes that the process is too slow. Well, it's too slow because it's too important, is my view on this. Okay, given that, I'm about halfway done my time, so what I want to do is go into overview and a little bit of what the actual DASC working groups are. I have a potpourri of groups here. Many of those are still active. Some of them are actually just been approved. Other ones are actually been approved a while ago and are now being further work is being in another group. But as you'll see, I have a reason for talking about each of the groups to give you a good oversight as to the breadth and the width, the breadth and the depth of the IEEE standards. So 1076, or P1076 for the Project 1076 VHDL. This is the original one, right? 1076, 1987. I started my work on this long ago, further than I want to think about. It's been maintained and it's been revised over the years. I know there's a lot of people in India who are still developing VHDL tools, lots of use of VHDL still around the world. Other languages for verification have come up over time. VHDL is still being used significantly around the world. The 1076 group is maintaining and potentially extending the VHDL language. The last version was approved in 2002. We just got a new PAR, the 1076 group got a PAR in 2011 and is looking somewhere in 2013 for revising the standard again. The notion is that it may be that 1076 is okay as it is or needs some minor revision. Or it may be that it needs a major revision to maybe bring it up to the same level as something like the system Verilog. That's being debated right now within the working group, and certainly those of you who are interested in VHDL are encouraged to contact Jim Lewis. I have the email address there because they are right in the middle of debate on the future of VHDL. 1076.1, you'll notice the .1. That indicates that this is a so-called dot standard or a standard that's based on a other standard. So 1076.1, which is VHDL analog mixed signal, clearly is based on VHDL. You can see the charter there is to revise, maintain, and enhance VHDL analog and mixed signal extensions. I have the working group type, which is individual. I mentioned before the difference between working groups where individual people join versus where entities, that is companies, institutions, nonprofits, so forth, can join. This is an individual membership. It's in the middle of a new PAR that has been approved in 2011. So again, 1076.1 is in the middle of getting requirements for its next version. It did its last version in 2009. So again, I would expect 2012, 2013. Going even further, I won't spend much time on this. This is a matter of there's packages for electrical, thermal, mechanical, and energy domains related to the VHDL AMS work. We move on. The 1647E language, E was a verification, or is a verification language. It was developed by Veracity. It's been gone through several revisions. They are currently analyzing the needs for the next revision. It was approved last year. I think we'll be probably looking at 2014. Again, Darren Galpin from Infinity in the UK is the chair of the group. If you are interested in E, he's the right person to talk to about getting involved in the activity. 1666, this is one near to my heart. As you can see, I am the chair of this group, or I was the chair. System C, I think you'll all be familiar with. This is the dominant system-level language. As I say to people, if you have a smartphone or a digital camera, chances are System C was used somewhere in it. We approved during the 2010-2011 period a new language reference manual. I have on the slide here, the slide was developed about a month or two ago. It's on the review committee's agenda. It has been approved. So there is now a 1666-2011 standard. I can certainly give you information on it. It will be published early next year. The big changes are the TLM 2.0 is part of it. TLM 1.0 is actually explained a little bit better, and there's various errata from the ASCII version of System C. So this is, I think, very important that we had 5 years between the original System C, and we now have passed the new version. So this is a very interesting development, I think, one that lots of the world is going to be looking for. 1685 IP exact, I mentioned this, you'll notice that it's actually being done in Accelera right now. This is one that came from the Spirit Consortium, went into Accelera, and, well, Spirit went into Accelera. The IP exact was standardized by the IEEE, and now that particular standard is being revised, and there's activity being done within the Accelera standards group. Once that is finished, that will be contributed into the IEEE, into the 1685 working group, and there'll be a new version of 1685, or P1685. You can see there's a symbiotic relationship between Accelera and the IEEE, where, you know, in this case, the IEEE does the standardization of the 1685, but based on work that's being done in Accelera, or historically on the Spirit Consortium, which is absorbed into Accelera. You'll notice also that the chair there is Rohit Jindal from ST in India. This is a good example of where an Indian engineer has done a fantastic job of taking over a standardization activity and really driving it. This is a really gung-ho group. Lots of work being done. If you're interested, Rohit, you certainly can contact him. Yeah, you know, he's looking for all comers to help on IP exact. 1734, I mentioned this. It's already been approved in June of 2011, but in case you're not familiar with it, this is when Kathy Werner of Freescale drove. Based on the old VSIA QIP. Essentially, this is a way for IP producers to indicate to users what quality measures they have met in the IP, and for IP consumers to be able to see from vendors what's there, what kind of IP quality they can expect. It's all done in XML, which of course allows platform portability and allows extensions pretty easily. So I think this is an important one. It has been approved, but I wanted to put this on here in case you're not familiar with it. You might want to take a look. Sure, Kathy would be happy to give you a pointer to it. Going on, 1735, this is one that's ongoing. They expect to be voting next year, but lots of discussions going on. The idea is, how do you do IP encryption and design protection for other DASC standards? So there's discussions on, okay, how are we going to, when we write System Verilog IP, how are we going to have uniform encryption technology, and how are we going to protect IP and so forth? This is a very, very important topic. It spans almost all of the DASC standards. Steve Dovich of Cadence is the chair. It's really worthwhile taking a look at it. You'll notice it is an entity membership, so companies need to join. Steve, I'm sure, will be happy to give information on joining to anyone who contacts him. 1800 System Verilog, one of the more active groups. The System Verilog, I think all of you will know, this is a language that came out of the Superlog language in the mid-2000s. It has gone through at least 2 levels of standardization, initially in 2005, and then it was in 2009. This is getting to the point where it's almost finished with the 2011 extension. We're expecting it in October in this month to be done, or to be frozen in some sense, all the requirements and lots of the work. We expect to have a ballot, to have the balloting group started in this first half of 2012. However, there will be a new version of it down the road. There's a number of things that were put on the back burner. So I would expect in the 2014 timeframe, there will probably be at least a slight and maybe not a more intense version of System Verilog. So if you are interested, certainly in having your company be on the balloting group for System Verilog for the P1800 or in joining in the next version, because this will be starting up and there may be things you think need to be in System Verilog, or your company thinks, or your particular group of companies, maybe there's some partnerships think needs to be in there. Please get in contact with Karen Pieper. She's very, very proactive. I think it'll be interesting. They'll be interested to hear from you. 1801, this is otherwise known as UPF. This is a low-power format. Lots of work is being done right now. They really want to make sure that they get the next version right, so there's some discussion in adding features that are found in, or compatibility features that are found in other low-power formats that are out there in the world. Right now, lots of requirements being done. This is one, if you're interested in low power, and your company is interested, since it is an entity-based group, they might be interested in joining, because this is right now doing the requirements phase. There's certain contributions that are coming in, and once those contributions come in, the new version will be developed throughout the rest of 2011 and into 2012. Right next to the last line, it says currently projected ballot in 2012. I would say that's towards the end, so there's plenty of time to come in and influence this standard. John Biggs of ARM is the new chair. John is very proactive in soliciting and getting lots of input from the community. Okay, so I went very quickly through lots of material there, and I'd like to talk about, to finish up before I take your questions on, what a relationship could be between the Design Automation Standards Committee and the Indian EDA community. Now, these are not mutually exclusive. Okay, they're not mutually exclusive. Several of these could apply, and there may be things I haven't thought about here, so it could be during the Q&A or, just statements that you have, or I'd be happy to follow up with you individually after this webinar. One thing that occurred to me when I was first thinking about this is that we have a situation where the DASC and the Japan Electronic Industry Trade Association, otherwise known as JETA, have a very good relationship where twice a year the DASC and JETA, actually it's more than twice a year in practice, it's a minimum of twice, but it's typically been about 4 times a year, where we exchange information. So, for example, I was in Japan in January, I was in Japan in July, I will be in Japan in November, and each time I had a meeting between the DASC and JETA where we exchanged information as to where we were at. The JETA Special Interest Group, that's where SIG means here, provide lots of feedback. So, for example, in the System C working group, the P1666, JETA gave lots of information, lots of input into that process. They sometimes joined the working group, but because of severe time zone differences and, of course, language barrier, they didn't always join. They tended to prefer to send their comments via email. The standards interest group that I'm talking to at the moment, for example, you on the webinar, might want to have this kind of relationship. That's one thing that we could have. So we could have a situation where the DASC 2 times a year, 3 times a year, I'm not sure what the number would be, could have a phone call with you to have a discussion on what the DASC is doing, what issues. Well, you could tell us what you see from the Indian perspective. That would be a possibility. The other possibility, not mutually exclusive, is that an Indian group like the Standards Interest Group could actually join the group as an entity, could join the DASC as an entity. The DASC allows both individuals and entities to join. For example, Synopsys is an entity member of the DASC, whereas Cadence is not, but I am a member of the DASC as an individual. We allow a mixed entity, Indian entity and individual. Maybe we'll have the JETA group trying to get them to join as an entity. This would allow full voting members, full participation, and so forth. So that's a possibility. Another, again, not mutually exclusive possibility might be for there to be DASC-sponsored working groups that could be headquartered in India, where the chair and lots of the members, maybe all of the members in some cases, might be working engineers in India. This, for example, I can imagine two reasons why you might want to have that. For example, there may be specific Indian local requirements that need to be that are candidates for standardization that aren't being taken care of in other DASC working groups. In that case, it would make perfect sense for there to be a working group headquartered in India with potentially, for example, U.S.-based members joining, at whatever time the meetings are held, that have one of those groups formed. It could also just be a group of engineers looking at the current roster of DASC standards and saying, look, here is something that needs to be standardized that isn't being done. It's nothing particularly special to India. It's special to the entire electronics industry. It's not being done. We have the right expertise among the people in certain number of companies that have engineers in India. We'd like to form that group, and everybody who's member of has the right qualifications can join. And it happens to have meetings on Indian time, maybe time shifted occasionally for U.S. time or European time, but certainly have the leadership coming out of the industry, of the Indian industry. That's also a potential. Okay, I am open to all possibilities. Any of the three, all of the three could work. There may be other possibilities I just have not thought of. With that, that is my final slide, and I see my time is almost up. So I'm certainly open to any questions or any discussion. You have my email address, so certainly you can get in contact with me. If there's enough interest from the Standards Interest Group, I would certainly entertain a phone call, a group phone call to have a discussion. I can even have a discussion with the DASC membership if we want to explore any possible relationships. With that, thank you very much.
Thank you, Stan. We have about 7 questions from the audience. I'll take the first one. Says, question on slide 23. Technical work on next version of P1801. Can you please elaborate more on technical work items?
The technical work items. There's been a number of items. The way P1801 is set up, there's items in the C-level interface, on extensions, on analog mixed signal, and I forget what the other ones are. There's like 4 or 5 subgroups. I know some of the things that have been added have been some extended interfaces with the C language. There's been some new definitions added for potential down-the-road interface with analog mixed signal technology. There's been a number of errata that have been fixed. Karen Pieper is probably the right person to give you a full update. There's been so many additions that it would take me another hour to go through those. But Karen is the right person to give you a rundown of what's happening in the P1800. P1800, yes.
Second question, how much time one needs to spend per month or per year on technical committee and technical work?
Good question. I don't believe anybody is working on it full time. I typically have seen in a group like P1666, the System C, that people were putting in at the real heavy contributors were probably working about 1 day a week on that activity. Less heavy contributors were working a couple hours a week. There would be 1 or 2 super, contributors who maybe were working half time, but that's because their companies had, major stake in System C. That tends to be a way it works in any one of these working groups. Companies, typically EDA vendors, will put more people on and they'll be working more. User companies, typically the ones that are really involved, will be about 20, maybe 20%, 1 day a week. But that can be scaled back. It's a matter of not so much quantity but quality. I know that in the 1666, the System C group, there were a number of contributors who really didn't take that much time. It's just the quality of what they produced or what they contributed to the group was so high that they were just highly valued members.
Next question. Can non-members or members who are not part of IEEE-SA but have IEEE membership participate in design automation standards that is an individual standard?
The answer is yes. Individual standards, unless you want to be an officer, unless you're running for one of the officers' position, you actually don't even need IEEE membership, as I understand it. I certainly recommend IEEE membership. For entity-based membership, of course, the entity, the company or the institution, a nonprofit university, has to be a member of the IEEE Standards Association.
Next question, how can members sign up to participate in IP-Exact standards? How often are the meetings, and does it suit timings for Indian audience?
I would refer you to Rohit. My understanding is that they meet once a week. I think that the timing is more or less around this time of the day. I am on their email reflector, and I see emails that seem to see that they're meeting at 7 a.m. Pacific time. So it's around this time of the day. And they are very, very active. There are multiple subgroups within that group, and individuals with particular interest join the particular subgroups. So Rohit Jindal, whose email is on the slide that I had on IP-Exact, he's the right person to give you the exact information on that.
Is the System Verilog 1800 standard that you mentioned in your slides a superset of the old 1364 Verilog standards?
Yes, it is. The old 1364 standard was absorbed into the 1800 standard several years ago because it was a subset of System Verilog. That is, Verilog is I'll put it this way, look at it from the other direction. System Verilog is a proper subset of Verilog.
Can JETA SIG participate in IEEE design automation standards? How will their requirements impact the PAR process?
Oh, yes. JETA is a strange, not strange, it's a special case in that JETA is actually a corporate member of the IEEE Standards Association, so they have full rights to join and to have an impact and influence the PAR process, to be any of the working groups, to be in the balloting groups, and so forth. They often, because of the time difference and the language difference, tend to act as if they were separate from the IEEE and try to just give feedback via email. They could work either way. In the case of JETA, depending on the individuals and the strength of interest, they will either directly participate in the working group and the balloting group activity, or for other standards, they will more or less act as consultants. And during our, three times a year meetings, they will, give feedback. In the case of a group like the Standards Interest Group here, if, of course, it wanted to join the IEEE Standards Association, then, of course, it would be able to join every working group and every ballot group. If it wasn't organized in such a way to join, we could still have the kind of relationship that JETA has, and we could, the DASC and the Standards Interest Group could very much have, bi-yearly or tri-yearly discussions.
And we have one final question. How does IEEE Design Automation Standards Development work with Design Automation Standards Development with an Accelera/Spirit and other standards consortium?
Okay. Groups like Accelera and, of course, Spirit, who's now part of Accelera, and then OSCE, act as what I call feeder organizations. That is, they produce the raw material, and it's not very raw, actually. It's very baked material for their standards for example, System C and System C TLM in the case of OSCE, originally System Verilog, now UVM, Verilog AMS, and so forth, and Accelera. And those are contributed into the IEEE process where further work is done on them, and it goes on to IEEE standardization and eventually dual logo status with the IEC. In some cases, the finished standard is then further worked on within the feeder organization. So, for example, System C is worked on in OSCE for the next version, and whatever additions are put on top of the IEEE standard go contributed back into IEC. This is the way IP Exact is being worked. On the other hand, the system Verilog standard was contributed into the IEEE, and all subsequent work has been done in the IEEE.
Okay, thank you, Stan. That was the last question. So now we'll continue with the presentation. Remember, next up is Mr. Harish Mysore. He's the director of the new IEEE Indian office, and he will tell us about that office and how it can serve the Indian community.
Yeah, thank you, John. I would like to thank all of you who joined today's webinar. I'm Harish Mysore. I take care of India operations of IEEE and based in Bangalore. We started this office 1st of June, but prior to that, IEEE management visited several times to India and did the survey and felt that it is appropriate time to have a direct presence in India. In the second slide, if you look at, we have 11 different sections and close to 37,000 members in the beginning of the year. Now, as the college season starting, we have been inundated with lots of queries about starting student chapters on an everyday basis. The Bangalore office, besides this, there are other international offices, one in Japan, one in China, and Singapore office takes care of the regional activities as well as the membership-related issues. The India office in Bangalore, the next slide, please. India office has embarked on several initiatives. As you can see, two main areas for us to focus in India are standards and education. Today's discussion, if you see, it is on the standards, but we have several other opportunities to standardize things out of India and better participation from engineering and scientific community from India for IEEE standards activities. We are starting several such initiatives. I would like you to join appropriate standards-related activities and support IEEE initiatives out of India. On the education front, we are looking at faculty development. We are also looking at skills development through National Skills Development Program, which is starting in India in a big way. Similarly, for the work what IEEE and its members are doing, we are also trying to provide the PR type of activities so that there is more awareness of IEEE and IEEE initiatives in India society at large. We are also looking at computer society-related certification programs, which CSDA for students and CSDP for professionals, which are already active in several places. I would like to tell you that in the state of Jammu and Kashmir, in the Jammu University, CSDA has been taken up in a big way by the state government's initiative. Hence, there are several universities which are actively trying to put this as part of the curriculum so that software engineering becomes a part of study other than just studying the computer science subject. And we are also trying to improve the overall membership value proposition and the experience of members in India by bringing out few India-specific initiatives for the members. The way we see opportunities in India, every area of IEEE's work, there is immense opportunity for us. One is to grow membership. We don't have to do much. Actually, we have to just serve the requirements here, and that itself will give us a very big growth in the membership base. And we plan to introduce some membership benefits which hitherto have not been delivered to India because of various regulatory and other reasons. We are exploring possibilities of providing certain type of insurance and discounts for technical book purchase or tools like computers and other software purchases by the members here in India. And digital library penetration is quite good in the universities. We at this moment have around close to 700 colleges and universities in India have IEEE library access, the online library. And there are many who are subscribing to journals and other publications in India. There is immense opportunity for us to grow all these activities in India. One big area where our members have been asking us to do in India is to bring internationally reputed conferences. There is a serious shortfall in this particular area as we see. There are more and more networking type of activities in India than the technical conferences of international repute. We certainly would like to bring in few, and cloud-related conference is going to be with the help of IBM India. We are planning to conduct it next year. And similarly, we are also looking at smart grid-related initiatives and workshops and seminars here in India. There is opportunity for us on humanitarian and other activities. With this, I would conclude my brief introduction to India. You are most welcome to contact us anytime, and I will be able to support you in your questions and then provide you the right answers and the contacts which are needed to take this initiative forward.
Thank you, Harish.
Thank you very much.
Now, Mr. Sri Chandra, Chair of the IEEE India Standards Interest Group, will tell us about the SIG and the EDA subgroup.
Hi, good evening all. I am Sri Chandra, and for my day job, I work with Freescale Semiconductors as part of their EDA CAD group in the Tools and Methodology organization. So let me briefly talk about the motivation for the Standards Interest Group. So this is an initiative that has recently been started, when I say recent, about a year ago, to promote standards development activities within India. IEEE-SA came to India about roughly a year and a bit ago, did a lot of outreach sessions and workshops, and one of the needs that was identified was we have a very big R&D engineering community base. However, the participation in standards activity, the gap was large. The contributions were minimal. So we thought that we can identify an excellent platform where we can get together all these volunteers from the various communities and provide a way for them to participate and contribute to standards development activities. As part of this initiative, we actually did it through consensus. We set out a blog program, and we sought the feedback of engineers on the focus areas that we need to target for standards activities, and then we set up various focus groups, which I will talk about later in my slides. The key thing to understand is these standards interest group activities, they are driven by the community of volunteers for each of the focus areas. So the volunteers get together, they decide what their charter is, what their key process or project initiatives are, and they go and drive those initiatives. So each of the areas decides on a set of goals and activities, and the IEEE-SA and the IEEE section help the SIG, the Standards Interest Group, connect with the right community and the right technical society to drive those efforts. So at this point, I would like to mention that some of our initiatives are very heavily supported by the IEEE Bangalore section in India. So I will talk briefly about the mission and charter. I have bracketed them into three main points. The first and foremost being to be able to increase the participation and contribution from Indian community, both to existing standards as well as new standards. There are a lot of relevant existing standards which are actively being developed. Stan referred to a whole heap of standards in the design automation space that are still very active. They have published versions already, but still there are ongoing activities in those standards, for example, P1801. Of course, there are a lot of new standards that are coming up, and we want to ensure that we take an opportunity here to drive and take some leadership role in enabling these standards and contributing to these standards. The second point is something I would like to highlight. Like for people, I'm sure a lot of people here have been working in the industry for 10 to 15 years, and you have seen the change in India from the way that we were in the late 80s to mid-90s, where we were mainly a service-driven organization, to now R&D-driven organization, whether it be a design house from a multinational corporation or whether it be a local Indian organization. We are doing a lot more R&D. And for us to be able to compete in global markets, we need to understand and embrace standards and be able to participate in standards development, make sure that our products are standards compatible so that we can go and sell these products in a global community. The third area that we would like the standards interest group to target is to see what are all the areas that are India-specific. Of course, India is a very big country, a lot of cultural diversity, a lot of various diversities, not just cultural, and there are some India-specific problems that we can address, and we can effectively implement standards while addressing these problems. And I will briefly allude to it in my next slide. Okay, so let me talk briefly about the focus areas of the SIG. So based on the block feedback we did, we identified several key focus areas. None of these focus areas should be of any surprise for people who are aware of the Indian engineering community. Of course, we have a big presence in software and IT industry. So we have one area on that, and it's driven by Arjuna. We have a telecom and computer networking group, which is driven by Madnapalli and Anand. And we have the EDA and the VLSA focus area, which is the target for today's audience, which is driven by Srini Venkatraman. We also have initiatives on the standards in education, cloud computing initiative, and one of the big initiatives that we are currently targeting is the smart grid and energy efficiency, where smart grid is getting deployed in India in a very big way. So when I talk about these initiatives, there are members who are signed up to each of these focus groups who have identified a certain set of goals in how to participate in either standards, or what are all the gaps in existing standards, or how to convert existing standards into an implementation aspect for India. So with the help of IEEE, we have email list servers that have been set up for each of these focus areas, including the VLSA and EDA focus area. I'm sure that quite a few in the audience are probably already aware and have signed up, but you haven't, you can please go to the mentor website that I have mentioned at the bottom, and it provides you all the necessary details to sign up for standards activities. If you have any queries on standards interest group and the initiatives that we are driving in these focus areas, please feel free to get in touch with me. Thank you.
Thank you, Sri. We're almost towards the end of our session for today. But first, I wanted to give the audience some information on how they can participate in IEEE standards activities. The first step is to go to the IEEE Standards Association homepage. The URL is posted there on the slides. And then search for a project you're interested in. You can search for projects by project. In this case, for EDA projects, you would look under industry applications. You could also search for topics by working groups. And again, the EDA working groups would fall under the industry applications. Or you could go to the link that says contact the staff liaison, but it's really will take you to the list of sponsors, which are usually IEEE societies. And in this case, for EDA standards, the sponsor would be the IEEE Computer Society. Underneath that is the Design Automation Standards Committee. And from any of those three links, you will be shown a link to contact the staff liaison for more information about joining the working group. So it's really just 3 easy steps to participate in any of the IEEE-SA standards. The final piece of information I wanted to provide to you is the contact information for all the presenters today and myself. The email addresses are posted here on the slides, and these slides, along with the audio part of today's webinar, will be posted on the web. I will send the link to that information to everyone who registered for today's webinar. And unfortunately, we've reached the end of today's session. There are no more outstanding questions. I'd like to thank everyone for participating, thank the presenters, and hope you have a wonderful evening. Thank you.